And speaking of the 250th, I want to move now to our conversation with Colleen Shogan and Lucas Morel. And let me just make some brief introductions before inviting them up to the front here. Dr. Colleen Shogan served as the 11th Archivist of the United States, the first woman in American history appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate to lead the National Archives and Records Administration. A noted author and political scientist, Colleen is deeply committed to civics education and prioritized sharing the records of the National Archives to a wider audience. Today, Dr. Shogan is a senior advisor to More Perfect, where she is CEO of the In Pursuit Project, and she is senior fellow for civics education at Stand Together, and an adjunct professor of government at Georgetown University. Prior to becoming the Archivist of the United States, she was senior vice president and director of the David Rubenstein Center at the White House Historical Association, worked in the U.S. Senate, and served as a senior executive at the Library of Congress and its Congressional Research Service. She's a native of the Pittsburgh area, holds a BA in political science from Boston College and a PhD in American politics from Yale. She's the 2024 recipient of the American Political Science Association Hubert Humphrey Award for outstanding public service, and she's a member of JMC's National Civics Council. Professor Lucas Morel has taught at Washington and Lee University since July 1999. He also teaches in the summer master's program in American History and Government at Ashland University in Ohio, summer programs for the Claremont Institute for the Study of Statesmanship and Political Philosophy, and high school teacher workshops sponsored by the Ashbrook Center, Gilder Lehrman Institute, Jack Miller Center, Bill of Rights Institute, and Liberty Fund. In 2008 through 9, he was the Garwood visiting research fellow at the James Madison Program in American Ideals and Institutions at Princeton. He is a trustee of the Supreme Court Historical Society, former president of the Abraham Lincoln Institute, a consultant on the Library of Congress exhibits on Lincoln and the Civil War, and the list goes on of impressive credentials. Currently serves on the U.S. Semi-Quincentennial Commission, which we'll talk about in a moment, which is planning activities to commemorate the 250th anniversary. He's written extensively for a number of publications, and he's a member of JMC's board, fairly recent addition to our board, and we're very glad to have his participation with us, as well as our academic council. Please join me in welcoming Colleen Shogan and Lucas Morel. Well, we're about to have a big birthday party for our country, the 250th, and in case nobody's told you that yet. Both of you are involved in preparations for that anniversary, and I want to start by asking you both, what does success look like for the 250th? If it's going to be a successful anniversary celebration, what is that going to look like for our country? And I'll start with Colleen.
Well, thank you so much, Hans, and thank you for inviting me to be here. It's an honor to speak with you and spend some time with you this evening and talking about what I think is a really pivotal time period for our country. I'll just say two things. We could talk about a lot of metrics. We're both political scientists, so we could really get technical about this. But I'll just talk in more general terms when I thought about your question. And I would just say there's two things. The first thing would be that we start to go back to thinking about history seriously in this country. And I mean, of course, at 250 years, we want to think about America's future. We want to think about the challenges of the present. But what better way to do that than to look at our past, to understand, to inform our present and our future. And I think that for the past decade or so, history has been viewed as a third rail. It's been viewed in ideological prisms. This has turned a lot of people off, a lot of Americans off, but that doesn't mean that they're not interested in American history. I think actually the exact opposite. I think most Americans are very interested in American history. I saw it every day at the National Archives when I would walk out in the rotunda and I would talk to visitors from all across the country and ask them why they had bothered to take time to come and visit the National Archives when they can go to a whole bunch of different places when they're spending time in Washington, D.C. So I hope that we use this moment to be able to go back and in some ways figure out ways that we can depoliticize some of American history so that everybody, all Americans, feel welcome in studying it and learning from it. And people say it can't be done, they walk away from it, and I fundamentally disagree with that. I think it can be done if it's done seriously and carefully and with participation by a broad array of people. And then the second thing I will say is that I hope that we use the 250th as a way to think about the principles in the Declaration of Independence. It's a pretty fundamental thing. But I think that that is an opportunity for unifying in our country, is to recommit to those principles and discuss them and also debate them. It's okay not to agree on every how we execute those principles, right? Or how we interpret those principles. That's all right. We should try to disagree in a civil and productive manner, but we should not shy away from them. And it is really the basis of, if we're going to get through this and we're going to find a way that we can get through it and with more unification, it's going to be through those shared principles. So I hope that's the second thing we do.
Yeah, that was excellent. What she said. One thing that's going to happen that is going to be ineluctable. People are going to be tired of red, white, and blue by the end of 2026. In other words, what we don't have to try to do is gin up interest in this country. Commercial sponsors are going to be, if you sell anything next year and don't tie it to the founding, you've been on Mars or the moon or in some other country. So one thing we don't have to do is raise awareness. It's already out there. And I'll say a little more about what the commission is doing along those lines, along with 50 states and half a dozen territories. The thing that we do need to do more deliberately and won't happen in a thoughtful way, and it would not be a success next year, looking back to July 4th in particular, 1776, is what you've already mentioned, which is an increased knowledge. A success would be, at the end of next year, people have a better understanding of America. And for me, I'm a Lincoln guy. He's my area of expertise. And where did Lincoln go? Where did he direct the nation to when we were having, if you will, an identity crisis? Gettysburg, right? November 19th, 1863. He dated us back to not the Constitution, but the Declaration of Independence. That's where that weird 7 years came from, right? Psalm 90 and all that. When we were struggling as a nation, as one people, right? Lincoln said, here's the place to go. This is who we are. This is our mission statement, the Declaration of Independence. And so it would be a success next year if people who had some sense of the Declaration, and I don't mind them confusing with the Constitution, that's actually healthy, but it would be a success if people have a better understanding of human equality as the central idea of this country. If I had to pick one principle, I'm on Lincoln's coattails here. But if they had a better sense of the challenge of consent, the consent of the governed, that's not something that happens well without some effort. And in fact, it's precisely because of the challenge of consent that made equality a struggle for us from the jump to make a reality for all Americans. It didn't happen right away. It didn't happen for everybody. And the reason for that was the flip side of equality is consent. We need to regain understanding of what we mean by inalienable rights and what government by consent of the governed. These sorts of principles, things that we can mouth, but I'm not sure are studied very well in this country. And so there's a number of efforts, thankfully, already underway to help people understand that. And for me, the best news is that the high school teachers and middle school teachers want non-ideological, non-partisan. They want the latest in scholarship, but they don't want it if it's simply trendy and vogue. There's a lot of that, and PhDs are minted to do the trendy and vogue thing. New York Times had a fairly lengthy article that David Blight and I were quoted in, where the teachers are saying, look, there's all these resources out here. And by the way, most teachers now who are teaching civic, social studies, and history don't use textbooks. They're going online for sources. And so the key thing for them is directing them to the primary sources, not this or that person, not even my interpretation of Lincoln or Calhoun or whomever. They want to know, well, what was actually said? And they're going to find out, as you said, it was a contested history. That America was the product of debate, disagreement. We don't have to be afraid of that. What the problem is when you only focus on certain aspects of it. And so for me, the good news is I do a lot of high school teacher workshops, is they are hungry for this kind of professional development. There's plenty of education pedagogy out there, but they love to rekindle the thing that got them into teaching social studies to begin with. And so if they can read, political sermons from the Revolutionary time where they discover, wow, the Old Testament was quoted more than any philosophical text. Wow, news to me. More than Montesquieu, more than Locke, right? They can read, even guys like John Calhoun, defenders of slavery, to see, wow, there were alternatives that were presented to the American people. And whoa, it wasn't fated to have Lincoln as the 16th president of the United States. He is improbable candidate, let alone the guy who actually won the election. But there were other alternatives on the table. I'm not afraid of those alternatives. I teach them in my Lincoln seminar. And so success for me, I'm a teacher. Success for me is teaching, is people learning more about their country. It's really difficult to love things you don't know, things that are strange, things that are foreign, or things you've been taught are ugly and aren't admirable. Half wouldn't fight for this country. That tells me they don't know this country. I have faith if they grow in their understanding of this country, they'll realize, hey, we need to hold on to this. What can I do to hold on to this?
Lucas, you're a member of the America 250 Commission, and what is the commission, and what should people in this room know about it?
So the commission was created under the Obama administration and Congress in 2016. It's a federal commission, all appointed by Congress, and it's mostly, there's 8 members of the House and the Senate, both parties represented, and the leadership of both parties, of both branches of government, appointed 18 private citizens. There's 2 professors on this commission. I'm one of them. And there's why are you raising your hand? Who are you, sir? Bill McClay is the other professor. Can you imagine that? This one commission, and Bill and I are on the commission. It's fabulous. Sometimes things are just. Anyway, So it's a commission that is designed to actually do its work in a decentralized fashion. That's a frustration, I think I can say on behalf of Bill and me. As professors, we want the commission to be doing more in terms of content creation. But the good news is, as a commission, we've discovered that as we have encouraged and coordinated with states and territories to establish their own 250 commissions. I teach at Washington and Lee University in Lexington, Virginia. Lexington 250. There is a town commission or committee that nobody said you should do. They just decided, hey, 2026 is coming. We should plan stuff. We should do stuff. Let's talk to Kaminsky from Monticello. Let's talk to Lucas. He's right over 2 blocks away. The good news is we see that already a lot of content is being created that in our minds is fairly non-ideological, nonpartisan. And so we're trying to encourage and get behind those efforts. The things that we are creating are much more solicitous of all 340, 50 million Americans. So we've got Airstreams being pulled by Dodge Rams, in-kind donation to the commission. We don't have a lot of money. These guys are rolling through towns and interviewing Americans and asking them, what does America mean to you? What do you love about this country? What about the future of this country excites you? So they're doing interviews of that. We're doing, of course, the usual essay, art, video contests. Students from 3rd grade through 12th grade are submitting videos, art, and essays about what America means to them. And the winners get to choose an iconic American history site. Guess what the most popular national park is among the winners? It's not the Statue of Liberty. It's not Ellis Island. It's not even anything, sorry, in Philadelphia. I say sotto voce. Yellowstone. Yellowstone is the _1 pick from these kids. And in a good number of cases, these kids have never been out of their town, never been out of their state. And so the winners get to go, they get to pick, I want to go to the Grand Canyon. I want to go to Yellowstone. Apparently that's a thing. So that's where, I know it's a thing, but that's really popular. We're going to have other mobile exhibits. America Innovates. Who are the inventors? We're going to do a lot of tie-ins in terms of promoting awareness for the semi-quincentennial. You said it right the first time. Very well done. America 250 is this organization that we've set up that's just a lot easier to pronounce. what are we going to do? Oh, there's going to be a lot of tie-ins to cultural, political events. Like, for example, what's the PJ Championship? I think is going to be in Philadelphia next year. Guarantee you somebody's going to mention something about 250th there. World Cup is here next year. World Series, world everything. Anything that's happening next year in America, culturally, entertainment, sports. As I say, the awareness part, that's definitely going to be there. You mentioned civic centers. I've been giving talks. You're giving talks. So at least we know two people are providing a reliable account of the founding. But this proliferation of civic centers, oh my goodness, it is happening at a time where there is a crisis in confidence in all the major institutions, religious, political, cultural, you name it. And higher education is big time under attack. And I even mean, prior to the current administration, recent administrations, Jonathan Haidt, I think that's how you pronounce his name, Haidt from New York. Is it pronounced Haidt? He says that in the United States, the American Academy has become an ideological monoculture. In other words, if you go there, the vast majority of the professors, regardless of the discipline, and especially certain disciplines, are only looking at life through one particular lens. And that's not healthy. I teach at a liberal arts college, and we're supposed to be liberating minds. We're supposed to be helping them make choices. And to make choices, you have to hear more than one thing. These civic centers, they're not just teaching civics. They're trying to return us to a more intellectually pluralistic arena to pursue your studies. And so the fact that they're, in a number of cases, they're explicitly set up to promote intellectual diversity, civil discourse. You're going to be tired of hearing that phrase, civil discourse. That is the rage. Even if you don't like it, you have to pay lip service to it for the foreseeable future, because that's something people don't think is happening very well on college campuses.
Let me turn to Colleen. You're involved with preparations for the 250th and the philanthropic and nonprofit sectors, touching on other sectors as well. But tell us about the work that you're doing with Stand Together.
More Perfect, right. So I joined an organization called More Perfect, which is an organization that comes together nonpartisan groups from all across the country and all of the presidential centers and foundations. All 40 presidential centers and foundations are members of More Perfect to join together to promote 5 democracy goals. And the first democracy goal is the one that I'm work on the most for More Perfect, which is universal civic education. And to that end, we have a couple of 250 initiatives that we're showcasing. By the way, another one is, besides mine, is Jane Kamensky's at Monticello, which is the Declaration Book Clubs, which is a great project. So she's trying to get book clubs, which is the only civic organization in the United States that's growing, by the way, is the number of book clubs. She's trying to get book clubs across the United States to take a break from the books for 1 week and to read the Declaration of Independence. So she's got all of the instructions and all the, how you foster the dialogue in the book club. She has all of that online, and you can get that for free. And I think it's a pretty good idea. Why not take, you can still have your wine, you can still have your hors d'oeuvres, but you can read the Declaration, right? And then go back to, the next Dan Brown book the next week. It's fine. But I run a initiative for More Perfect called In Pursuit. And really the goal for In Pursuit was, what Lucas referred to was when I was on the commission, the A250 commission, and was involved with it earlier, the one thing that I was concerned about was that there wasn't enough focus on the substance and the history, that there wasn't an initiative with the commission that solely was focused on history. And so when I had the opportunity to be able to do that with More Perfect, I jumped at the chance to do that. And what In Pursuit does is look back at the previous 250 years to inform the future. And the way that we're doing that in our first round in 2026 is we have commissioned 70 very short essays, only 1,200 words, about all of our presidents in American history and select first ladies. So we have 70 essays coming in, and we have a wide variety of public leaders, Pulitzer Prize historians, journalists, other thought leaders who are going to be writing these essays. And it was really overwhelming to me, the number of people. When I went out and started recruiting people this spring for this project, I mean, I can count on less than one hand the number of people who turned me down. Everybody said yes. And I said, listen, this is not an ideological exercise. Whatever you think about current politics, previous administrations, current administrations, go for it, but not in this essay. I don't want that in this essay. I don't want ideological or partisan interpretations of history. I want you to write an insightful essay about this person and their leadership. And I want you to boil it down to one lesson that can be in one sentence, kind of like a Ben Franklin aphorism, that will be the head of the essay, and then write 1,200 words about that lesson. And so it's not really a biography. So I wrote the essay on Grace Coolidge, and it's about authenticity, why authenticity is important in democratic leadership. So things like that. And I was just, overwhelmed by the response. President Bush is going to kick us off for the project. He's writing the essay on George Washington, and his essay will come out on President's Day, 2026. President Obama is writing the essay on Abraham Lincoln. President Clinton is writing the essay on Teddy Roosevelt. Laura Bush is writing on her fellow Texan, Lady Bird Johnson. Michelle Obama may break the internet, I don't know, with her essay on Jackie Kennedy. I think everybody's going to want to read what Michelle Obama has to say about Jackie Kennedy. And Hillary Clinton is going to write about one of her heroes, Eleanor Roosevelt. Chief Justice Roberts joined the project. He's already written his essay on William Howard Taft, and I read it. It is superb. He spent most of the summer, God bless him, thinking about William Howard Taft and writing this essay, and it really shows. It's tremendous. And then plus we have historians and journalists from all different walks of life writing some of the other essays. We're powered by Substack, so all the essays will be free. I didn't want any firewall on the essays. I had a lot of other outlets that were interested, but they were going to firewall the essays. And so what's the point if you firewall the essays? I want everybody to be able to read them. And then we'll do very aggressive promotion through social media and other digital outreach, through podcasts and other things to get those essays out there. So I'm very excited about that. And I'm also a civics fellow, a senior civics fellow at Stand Together, which is a philanthropic community really that is premised upon the principles in the Declaration of Independence. And Stand Together is going to make a big splash in 2026. They are going to enter the civic space. This is not an area for philanthropy that they have entered in before, and they're very excited about doing that. And they want civics to be taught in ways that are new and unique. So we're looking for new ways in which we can reach particularly young people. One of the projects that we've been involved with so far is a movie that I think you're going to hear a lot about. Actually, the trailer's coming out on Monday, Young Washington. So there's a movie that will be coming out the 4th of July, 2026, that portrays young George Washington. And not when he was president, not even when he was the general of the Continental Army, but when he was 22 years old. And he was in my neck of the woods in Pittsburgh in Western Pennsylvania, right? And he made a lot of mistakes. He had a lot of bravery and a lot of interesting things, but Washington had a little bit of learning to do when he was 21, 22 years old, and was involved, serving alongside General Braddock and really is credited with starting the French and Indian War for some of the things that he did. So it's going to be a great exploration of Washington because we think it can teach young people about, first off, teach them about courage and teach them about patriotism and teach them about leadership, but also that it's okay to fail, right? It's okay to make mistakes. And what were the mistakes that Washington made and how did he learn from them? And how did that inform his future leadership? So I'm really excited about that.
Well, you previously served as Archivist of the United States, of course, and were involved in preparations for the 250th. You were the keeper of the original signed Declaration of Independence, made even more famous by National Treasure.
Right.
What does the Declaration mean to you?
Right. Well, I mean, when I worked in we have over 40 buildings from the National Archives, but the most famous building is the one in Washington, D.C., with the rotunda that's right off the National Mall. And the days that I wasn't traveling and that I was working in Washington, D.C., I always made it a point to visit the founding documents, whether a lot of times that was in the morning when I would get into work. The documents would actually appear around 8 o'clock in the morning. And sometimes we would have private ceremonies in the rotunda, like military promotion ceremonies and other things. But a lot of times it was just quiet in the rotunda at 8 o'clock or 8:30 in the morning. And so when I would get in, I would go for a walk and I would go over, because there was no one there besides me and the security guards. And, I just like to take a moment and visit those documents. In particular, my favorite document was the Declaration, and why is it? And people sometimes were surprised when I said that. It's because the Declaration is our creed, right? It's what unifies us. It's what makes us Americans. And also what makes us unique. I like to say that it contains, as Lucas said, it contains the most audacious statement in the history of the world. This notion that all men are created equal. And you have to understand a little bit of history, right, to appreciate that statement, to understand that what came before these people and what was going on in the world when Thomas Jefferson dared to write those words. And was because there had only been autocracy previously. There had only been tyranny. There wasn't the idea of individualism. There wasn't the idea of the premise of rights that came intrinsically from God, that were protected by humanity of government. And I tried to explain this to people. This is why this was revolutionary. This was crazy. This is a whole new invention. The world that we live in today, that we all, in some ways, take for granted, was all created right there. What's before us. So for me, my job as archivist was a lot of other things. Believe me, was managing, an agency of well over 3,000 people, $500 million, 40 some locations, 13 presidential libraries. So there was a lot that I had to do as the head of that agency, but really the core of it was exactly what you said, was protecting the ideals of the Declaration and making sure that as many people as possible came to visit it and could read it. Now that is the one challenge, because the Declaration is faded, not when it came to the archives, but previously, because it was in the sun and it had different things that happened to it. So what I did, I said, what can we do about this? I mean, obviously I can't change the Declaration of Independence, but what we did was we took the stone print, which is the 1823 version of the Declaration. So if you've ever seen like an actual printing of the Declaration that you can read, you're actually seeing a replica of the stone print from 1823 that was made, and the copper plate replica. So we took the stone print and we made a replica of the stone print and blew it up. I mean, really, really big, huge. And we put it into the entrance of the rotunda. So when people, before they even went into the rotunda, they could stop and they could see the Declaration of Independence, this huge version of it, and they could read it. And I made them put a sign underneath it that said, stop, and the whole point of this is to read the document. Like, this is why we're blowing it up, is so that you can stop and read it. And I loved it, because when I would walk out at noon, to go get some lunch or something like that, take a little walk, I would see people almost every day. They were stopped in front of this huge Declaration of Independence that they could clearly read, and they were reading it. And that is the point. That's what, right, is making those things. People are curious about it and want to learn. And in my heart of hearts, I think that we do.
Yes. Everything that we know, he wrote. Yeah, I mean, the good news is they both loved the Declaration of Independence. So the book is called Measuring the Man, and it's actually a quote from Frederick Douglass explaining how Black Americans didn't just accept the great emancipator. They were always judging, always weighing, considering, sifting, don't like this, love that, wish he'd do this thing over here. And Frederick Douglass, in my mind, is the greatest articulator of that portion of America's assessing of Lincoln, measuring Lincoln. They both revered the Declaration of Independence. Lincoln called the equality principle the central idea of this country. He called consent the sheet anchor of American republicanism. And you see similar language in Douglass's writings. In his most famous speech, we call it "What Did the Slaves of 4th of July?" He didn't give it that title, but that's what it's known by. So this speech, delivered on July 5th, he says that the principles of the Revolution, the principles of the Declaration, are eternal principles. They're saving principles. And he said, I thank God that it's a young republic. In other words, we've got a little more growing to do in terms of fleshing out these principles. So the good news is both with Lincoln, who, because he was white and because he was the man in power during the Civil War, he, in a way, could take for granted those principles being true for him in a way that Frederick Douglass, who was born an enslaved person in Maryland, could not take those for granted. But both of them could consider themselves Americans because there was nothing in the Declaration that ruled either of them out because of their last name, because of where they were born, raised, both of them hardscrabble poverty. I'm a child of immigrants. My parents came to the United States in 1962. I was born 2 years later. I guess in a certain way, I got the zeal of a convert, right? My parents, they brought us here. It's just like, and I was raised in Manhattan. You can't tell by my accent because I grew up in California, but born in Manhattan, it was like watch Zoom, Sesame Street, and do your homework. Those were, the three things that made you an American. But for me, I mean, Lincoln has this great line from a speech in Chicago in 1858, in the year of the most famous debates in American history, the Lincoln-Douglas debates, the other Douglas, Stephen Douglas, where he called the Declaration of Independence the source of our ancient faith. He says, this is a country where a number of families can trace their lineage, their literal blood to people of the founding generation, some all the way back to the Mayflower. But then he says there's this whole host of all these other, and he lists these ethnicities, all these other people who can't do that. But when they look to the Declaration, and then he alludes, he almost quotes verbatim Genesis. He says, and they see bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. In other words, they see that those principles make them American as well. And so I see that for myself. What you called a creed, what King famously called a creed in his I Have a Dream speech, those principles in that document are what tell someone that they're American. And so for Lincoln and for Douglas, those were the key to our greatness. Those were the key to our reform. Bill Clinton, best thing he ever said, first inaugural address, he said, there's nothing wrong with this country that cannot be cured. Well, he said, there's nothing wrong with America that cannot be cured by what is right with America. We don't have to go to Japan. We don't have to go to France. We don't have to go to Mexico. We don't have to go anywhere else. Our problems, and we have problems, our problems can be solved by American principles, American institutions, and what I would call American mores or civic habits, like the rule of law, among other things. And so for me, these are the North Star, the touchstone of why America is significant, not just for us, but to the world.
I'm bullish on this because when I look around, first off, I also think I think this is kind of a fulfilling moment. So we have these problems, right? It's wonderful if our national institutions are stepping up to solve it. But that doesn't mean necessarily that they should go unsolved. What we're told those things. But we say, democracy exists in a lot of different institutions. It's not just in the national institutions. Democracy exists at the local level. It exists at civic associations. It exists as Americans as problem solvers, right? We come together and figure things out. And that's what I actually see in the community. I see a which was pretty significant. So funding is coming in, and we need to turn that funding. I agree with everything that you said. One of the biggest challenges is making sure teachers have the resources they need, social studies teachers, history teachers, civics teachers, because the disparity on the resources is vast. An average student in the United States is the beneficiary of about $50 a year of STEM spending, right? So the school district will spend about $50 a year on a student in STEM education. Now, I'm not against family of like engineers, so I'm not against STEM education or anything like that. But civics and social studies, 50 cents, okay? That's not even comparable. And civics and social studies and history is what we're trying to teach our future citizens of the United States to think critically about how to engage, not how to vote, I mean, how to engage, how to be a productive citizen, okay? When I was the Archivist of the United States on Valentine's Day in 2024, a terrible thing happened. Two young people walked into the National Archives late in the day and exploded pink powder all over the rotunda, all over the Constitution, the cases that held the Constitution, the Declaration. They made a huge mess of the rotunda. It took us 3 days to clean it up in a responsible way and had to be shut for those 3 days. When these individuals were detained in the rotunda and handcuffed, awaiting to be taken for processing, they told me that the reason why they did it was because they knew of no other way to get President Biden's attention to solve the crisis of climate change in this country. And I was so and then it clicked in my head. So this is a failure of civics. This is it. This is a failure of lack of teaching a whole generation about how to be a democratic citizen. It is not exploding pink power in the National Archives to get the president's attention about climate change. There are a lot of ways that you can work towards, environmental security or any cause that you favor in the United States, and you can have efficacy. This is not the preferred path in which to do it. And so we have to somehow turn the page. And we have to do it with our K-12 and our college students. But what about the people for 20 years who have failed for the past 20 or 30 years, and they haven't benefited from civics and history and social studies education? We got to pull them back in as well, or otherwise, they're already, voting age and participating in democracy. So the problem is not just even at the younger level, it's a little bit more compounded and more complex. So I hope we do use 2026 as a way for more awareness so that we really can instigate a civic renaissance. It should not be a partisan issue in any way, shape, or form. This is something the Democrats, Republicans, Independents, everybody should get behind, and we can solve by a resource problem. And then we also have to solve the problem that 36 states teach civics, plus the district, in the United States, but there's 14 that don't. And only 6 states teach civics on the middle school level. Only 6, okay? We've got a lot of work to do at a lot of different levels to make this happen.
Thank you. Let's take a couple questions.
I agree with you, your appreciation for the Declaration of Independence. I was wondering if there are as the archivist, are there other documents or items that you think are perhaps underappreciated or less well known that you kind of learn from learn more about or very more appreciation from their experience?
Well, one thing that I was probably a lesser known document that I made to bring it out a lot is we have people and we had special displays for it. I thought was a really important document was Lincoln's nomination of Ulysses S. Grant as the general of the Union Army, because what an extraordinary moment in American history. If Lincoln doesn't make that decision right then and there, most likely he's gonna prevail, but it's gonna be a lot longer than that decision right there. And I thought that was just probably not one of the best known documents, but also just is an encapsulation of an amazing decision made in American history. Another one that I like to point out, which was kind of haunting for me, was the radar plot from Pearl Harbor. So, of course, there was not computers back then, so when the Japanese planes were coming into Pearl Harbor, there were service members who were actually plotting those planes on a drawing, right? And, they must have known, right, when those planes did turn at the very southern tip of the island, when they come in, and they're gonna make the approach, for that Pearl Harbor, they must have known, right? And you can see that right on the radar plot. So what a great instrument to teach American history with, right?
Wow.
Is to show kids that radar plot, and you can really grasp the enormity of what that moment must have felt like to those individuals who created that record.
Very quickly, how can people get involved?
Even though I'm on the federal commission, the state commissions are the real drivers of this at the local level. So if it were me, I would get online and go to your state, just type Virginia 250 or Florida 250 and see what your state is doing in terms of programming, events, ways you can get involved, et cetera. They're obviously they're on the ground, they're closer to the action. But do visit the America250 website, and you'll see all the things that we're doing that we're calling tentpole initiatives, like this 3rd grade through 12th grade essay, art, video contest, and a number of other ways that the commission is soliciting opinions, ideas, stories from all Americans. And so both at the state and federal level, it's all online, so it must be true.
Well, certainly follow us, on In Pursuit. We're on all the social media, In Pursuit USA. And follow us on Substack, and just come along with us as we learn about American history. We have 70 lessons about American history that we're going to talk about throughout 2026. It's just going to be, a lot of fun. It's going to be very positive. We're going to confront challenges. We're going to confront failures, but we're also going to talk about our successes. So that's going to be a fun project. The other thing that I would say, I agree with what Lucas said. I think that on the local level, it's really important. So find out if your local historical association is planning to do something. If they're not, there's still time to plan something. Talk to the people that are in charge and see what you can figure out and what you can do. If there's no appetite or there's not a local historical association, I would say go to your library, your public library, or go to any local archive or museum and talk to them and say, what do you have planned for the 250th? And get involved, because a lot of these celebrations, the national celebration is going to be really important, and national projects like mine are great, but a lot of the fun is going to happen at the local level, and I really encourage people to get involved at that juncture.
Colleen Shogan, Lucas Morel, thank you very much.
Thank you.